Okay. Well, again, thank you for everyone, people that will be coming in. Hopefully, this is a major, major live stream. This is an interview I've been looking for years. I've been trying to get this interview that Howard Stern did with LaToya Jackson and Corey Feldman. This is I can't tell you how major this is because you can listen to it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down why it is important. Because it breaks a lot of the arguments that were made about LaToya Jackson back in the day, about her husband, about LaToya's state of mind. This corroboration now with LaToya Jackson finding this interview. I want to thank the person who sent this interview to me. I cannot thank you enough. I have been looking for this interview for years. I contacted Howard Stern fans. I can't tell you how many people to try to get a hold of this. And somebody that happened to be a supporter of the page must have been a Howard Stern fan or taped it in the past, because it sounds like it's on audio tape, sent it to me. This is major. It really, really is. And it's major in the sense of, maybe not in the sense of, in the legal sense of what can be done with it if it goes to civil, the civil trial happens. But what it does is, it reinforces the statements that were made by James Safechuck, Wade Robson, Jordan Chandler, Gavin Arvizo, and etc. It raises it in a very good way. And Howard Stern, for people who don't know who Howard Stern is, maybe you don't know, maybe you're overseas, I don't know. He's one of the best interviewers of our generation. This is a guy that could get people to almost say anything and admit anything, about themselves. He's the type of person that when he gets somebody on, he is a pit bull. He will go and go and go and go. And he can smell when people are BSing him. And because this was in a live format, because this was not something that, like the Katie Couric interview that people put up and the Tel Aviv conference and things like that, this was live. And you can see there is no script in this whatsoever. She's coming off, in some cases, Howard Stern is joking with her. Her husband comes on and kind of interrupts and kind of makes a fool out of himself, and they joke about that. And it's, in many ways, it's very serious, but it's also, she seems somewhat relaxed in the fact that she doesn't seem like people have said that Jack Gordon was basically, holding a gun to her head and saying, "You better speak." No, it doesn't sound that way at all. It sounds like she is really trying to come forward with something. And there's some other really key moments in this interview that even make it even more shocking. This interview is more shocking than I even remembered it, because I heard it so long ago. I remembered bits and pieces. But it is even more shocking than I remembered. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to play the interview. I'm going to play, and I apologize for unfortunately, the sound quality when you hear the interview, because what I'm doing is I'm using a microphone and just playing it on the on the computer. So unfortunately, it's not perfect, but hopefully you can hear it. And then I'm going to stop and pause, kind of like I did last night, to tell you why what she's saying is so important. And there's going to be bits and pieces in there that are not so important. They're just joking around and things like that. But I do think it's important. I'm going to play it right up to the third part. There's 3 parts. The last part's Corey Feldman coming on. And Howard Stern and Robin Quivers actually make some very good arguments, to LaToya Jackson. And it's a very compelling interview. To me, this is Bombshell, because this interview has not been heard in a long, long, long time. And it shows how, again, natural LaToya Jackson seemed to be discussing this, and how she had information that's now coming forward now. It's very, very telling. So I'm going to start off with the interview. And again, I apologize. I know it might be a little difficult to hear, but I also think that it's important to, again, I have to break the interview down. So I apologize for that ahead of time, but it's the only way I can do it at this point. So let me start playing this interview with LaToya Jackson, and then, like I said, I'll pause and kind of go over this. But I can't tell you enough. Now, people might think, oh, I'm making too big of a deal of this, but it really, really isn't. I'm really not. It really does corroborate a lot of what, especially James, stated. So let's take a listen here.
The house all the time. They slept over all the time.
Yeah, that was normal.
But she keeps changing her story. And I told Jay, I call him Jay, of course. My husband Jack.
Right.
I call him Jay. I told Jay when we left your show one day.
Your mother calls him a monster.
Yeah, the monster Jack.
The monster Jack. Yeah, you told Jay.
I told him, I said, what, Howard is smart. He knows something. I said, when he asked if you would ever let your children sleep with Michael or spend the night, I said, he knows something. He's onto something. And Jay said, what are you talking about? And I said, I just can't tell you, but he's onto something.
Well, I had said for years, how is it that even at these award shows that parents would allow these little children to sit on his lap, even if they were famous? And how is it that all of these young children are spending vacations and vacation time? It's amazing. But LaToya, you didn't offer...
Howard, let me tell you something, though.
Sure.
I'm going to pause it right there. What they're discussing, and it's very important, was that LaToya was making statements even before, years before, she came forward with the Tel Aviv conference. So the people that were saying that, oh, this was all about her, she saw an opportunity, or her husband saw an opportunity. No, she was discussing this before, and there's part of the interview, which I'm going to pause, which is very crucial, where even Robin Quivers, who's Howard Stern's, basically, she does the news on the Howard Stern show, which is basically a sidekick. She also brings it up. But this is very crucial. It's a very crucial point, and we're going to go, again, step by step. Let's listen a little further.
I'm not saying this to do anything to harm Michael or hurt him. I know a lot of his friends are going to dislike me for this, but what they don't understand is I have been an abused victim, and I know what it feels like, and I'm not going to stand by in silence and be a silent collaborator and let other kids be abused like this.
Why is everyone...
I don't know.
Why is everyone treating you like you're either hypnotized by Jack or that you are saying these things to get money? Why is that being said?
That's a good question. Because you know what? I'm definitely not saying that you get money. You don't get money when you do a press conference.
Right.
You don't get money when you do the Morning America.
Right.
When you do the morning shows. You don't get money when you talk to you on the phone.
Right.
All of these are just like, my mother is putting this in the people's minds so they can think, oh, she's just doing it for money.
Well, what you're
My
saying
mother is the one who's doing everything for money, because you know why? Once Michael's gone or whatever happens, or he stops talking to her, the bank check stops. Because he pays her every single 2 weeks. He gives her money.
Again, a very crucial point. It goes to motive. It goes to why, and this is what's been said with Dan Reed when he talks about why there is a financial motive on the Jackson side. Now, people say, well, the brothers and all that, they don't get anything from the estate. Oh, they don't, financially. But what they get is, they get a name that is recognized. And if that name now becomes sullied because of people now saying, I don't want to listen to Michael Jackson, or I don't have anything to do with the Jacksons, then their income is going to, and their livelihoods are going to drop. Because the reality is that people then are not going to be buying the Jackson 5 albums, be buying the memorabilia, or maybe going to see the reunion concerts or whatever, or the appearances, etc. All that affects the bottom line. It's not something that the estate is giving them. What the estate is doing is, especially what it did in the last 10 years, it brought Michael Jackson's name back up and sort of whitewashed the allegation, so people really didn't have that in their head, and then the estate went through the roof. And that definitely helps the Jackson family, even though they're not getting money from the estate. It helps them because people then now will think very kindly on the Jackson name, and that will help them in the long run. So this is a very important point, and when she brings up the fact that at that point in their lives in '93, and it was true back then, Jermaine Jackson wasn't. Maybe I'm not remembering something, but back then, I don't think Jermaine Jackson was really doing much of anything. I mean, he had some solo work and things like that, but he was nowhere near the magnitude of Michael Jackson or Janet Jackson. So so let's go further, and I'll keep on commenting.
And the point is, do you need money?
And she supports everybody. My mother supports everybody in that family. Jermaine was in that house with his kids.
Right.
My other brothers was in that house with his kids. So they have to stand up and say these things. But I'm not going to lie and let innocent children be scarred for a lifetime like I was. It's a terrible thing.
And you don't need money, right?
No, I don't, because you know what? I work every single day practically of my life.
And as someone told me, you make a couple of $1 million in a few weeks. Is that true?
Well, not in a few weeks.
That's what someone told us yesterday. You actually, through your touring and stuff and going around.
Yeah. I get paid very, very handsomely for what I do, and I work hard at it. I don't think it's free either.
So
I'm going to stop it there. That's another very valid point. So what they're saying is, well, she just wanted, Jack Gordon saw an opportunity, which I think he probably did. But with that being said, oh, it's all about money. Well, no. What Howard Stern's pointing out was that because Howard Stern had both LaToya Jackson and Jack Gordon on several times on the Howard Stern show. What he's stating is that LaToya did basically made her own money. And she even herself stated at one point that she was very good at saving her own money so to make sure that she was independent. And that's a very important point to understand at that time frame. Okay, in the 93, I think it was 93, 94 time frame, that wasn't the case. That, she was actually in Europe doing concerts, things like that. I mean, doing it and making money out of it because of her name at that point, the Jackson name. And that's another point you have to realize. LaToya Jackson, by coming forward, has more to lose back then, and so did Jack Gordon, her husband, by selling the Jackson name, because then, if she does that, then people might associate her with the allegations and what's going on with Michael Jackson, in the sense of that, oh, I don't have anything to do with the Jacksons. And that might hurt her income as well. So again, that bolsters what she's saying. So let's go further.
Well, when I say free, it's not like I do nothing and get paid a lot of money for nothing.
So LaToya,
I work very hard.
so what you're saying is that you felt an obligation to these children who are spending all this time together. Now, why do you think more children haven't come forward?
I think that, well, first of all, I know for a fact that there are a lot of children that are a lot older now, and they probably have girlfriends, and they're afraid and embarrassed because they don't want anyone to know that happened to them when they were so infatuated at a young age when we lived at home.
I'll stop it there. And very valid point. And that's the point that people have been making for years. That a lot of times people don't come forward because there's embarrassment, there's shame. They don't want to say anything. You also have to realize back then too, people were scared. This Michael Jackson was literally, he was the most famous person in the world. Okay, you're going up against someone who's one of the most famous person in the world, and then you have to come forward and say, well, this happened to me. And then now you're a teenager in high school. What is any teenager really want to reveal that, especially when it relates to Michael Jackson? Very valid point. Let's go further.
Mother knew everything that was going on. I have to admit, when I lived at home, I was a bit innocent.
But did your mother try to talk to Michael about it? Did she try to say, hey, listen, what you're doing is wrong, or she just played into it?
No, my mother she's actually the one who showed me the checks that were written, and I didn't understand it.
So he would write checks to people, and you're saying he would pay off the parents and say, hey, look.
To the children's parents, they were never on kids over at abundance. They were always like one at a time or whatever.
But why would a parent?
One would go, then another would come, and then all of a sudden my mother would snoop in his room.
And isn't what was in those allegations that Wade said he didn't like to have the children really mingle or be together, in the sense of that he didn't really like them all around at once. It did happen occasionally, but it wasn't something he preferred. Say you would have one child and then spend so much time with them, and then have another child, spend so much time with them. So all the things that they have been saying are being corroborated in an interview that happened back in 1993 that nobody even could find. This took, I can't tell you, an act of Congress to get this interview. Well, let's go further.
And she said, come here and I'll show you something. I go, what, Mother? I said, don't go on his drawers. He's going to think it's me. He's going to be upset. That kind of thing. And she was showing me these checks. And I go, what? So what about them?
So how did she explain the checks?
Look at the amount. And you know how much the amounts were for? What?
How much?
$1 million.
$1 million. You're saying
$1 million.
$1 million checks plus Rolls Royces. Wow. Who's that?
That was Jack Gordon, but he said $1 million checks plus Rolls Royces, which has been stated for years. Now, Michael Jackson gave some of these children, I think it might have been, I forget which child it was, but one of the children he actually gave a Rolls Royce, and there was actually there was a story printed, and this is, again, I haven't cross-checked this, but I do remember this story, that he also offered to give Aaron Carter a Rolls Royce, and his mother, basically said, no, it's too extravagant, you can't give that to my son. But again, what it's showing is that LaToya isn't saying there were hundreds of checks. She said there was, 2 checks, and they were both for, or at least one of them. But I think she said both for $1 million. But it gets even more interesting.
Hey, Jack. Hey, Jack, what's that beep?
Because he's picked up another line. Jay, you have to hang up.
Okay, he's on the phone. Hey, Jack, hang up. Oh, yeah, I am. Jack. Jack trying to get in on the conversation.
Yeah, I can't stand.
Because he knows these checks were written for $1 million.
$1 million?
Now, let me get this straight. Why would your mother?
And I would say,
But why would your mother show you the checks for the $1 million? I'm just curious.
she was outraged.
Right.
When she went ballistic when she saw this. She says, I said, so what? That's somebody that he likes. He wrote a check for. She goes, look at it good. You know what this is? She goes, this is Jimmy Safechuck. This is a little boy that comes over here that stays with him and stays in that room, and he's locked himself up in the room with him and he sleeps in the same.
For those that didn't hear that, I'm going to play that back one more time.
Outraged.
Right.
When she went ballistic when she saw this. She says, I said, so what? That's somebody that he likes. He wrote a check for. She goes, look at it good. You know what this is? She goes, this is Jimmy Safechuck. This is a little boy that comes over here that stays with him and stays in that room, and he's locked himself up in the room with him.
Do you know who that is? What she said her mother said. It's Jimmy Safechuck, who stays in that room, locked in that room. She stated the name. I thought she only went on Geraldo and actually alluded to them. She actually, and I didn't even remember this part of the interview, to be honest. She stated James's name back in 1993-94. I think that's when the interview was done. Way before anybody came forward even suggesting James Safechuck might be a victim. She actually stated the name and said that that check was written for James Safechuck. Now, if you watched Leaving Neverland, what James' mother admitted to was that they got a loan from Michael Jackson to buy a house, a second house in Los Angeles, in California, which houses then, even then, were not cheap. So it wouldn't surprise me if that check was written for them and then forgiven once she testified. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever because it's right in that time frame. Corroborates what James Safechuck's mother says. It corroborates what James said. It's right there. Very important piece of information. Extremely important piece of information. Like I said, I even put in the Twitter feed. This is not like Taj's Nothing Burgers, okay? Oh, he forgot. He mentioned that he was in the loft in the train station. Or look, they made a mistake on this date or whatever. This is information that's pointing directly towards what they're saying. Again, I love how the line of facts don't lie, people do. Well, guess what? Here is the fact. Here's what LaToya said back in the day, unscripted. Okay, unscripted. Howard Stern doesn't like people scripted. He knows, he can see it a mile away. And you can hear her talking. Doesn't sound like she's being, like she's scared or she's being intimidated. No, she's putting it right out there. Extremely, extremely important interview. So let's go further.
sleeps in the same bed with him. I said, sleeps in the same bed with him? And she goes, yes, what do you think they do up there, Latoya?
Well,
And she knows all this, and she knows it's true, and she gets on television and she lies. I'm not doing this for money, Larry. I'm sorry, Howard, you're not paying me.
right. Who you think I am, Larry King?
You're getting ready to talk to Larry King.
You're getting ready to talk to Larry King, Latoya.
Absolutely not. I am not. It's true, I am not. Honestly, guys,
But listen,
I'm not.
Latoya, listen. What is it, Jackie?
Could you imagine being a family and your 8-year-old kid comes home with a check? Mommy, look what I got.
Here's how it goes. The way I think it's given to the parents. It's not given to the
That's
kid.
right.
I think it's given to the
And
parents.
you're not telling this is a payoff to keep them quiet after they start to blab. This is payment before.
It's almost
No,
like
no.
it's almost like while it's going on.
Like your son's my
Thank you.
friend and
Yeah,
I'm
Howard got it.
Yeah, it would almost be like, hey, here's $1 million. Come on, let me
Yeah.
play with your kid.
Be happy.
Well, Howard got it. It's apparently, I'm not.
Again, another very important point. Here's a loan. Go buy that house, Mr. and Mrs. Safechuck. Go ahead, here's a loan. And it might not be stated outright, okay? But in Michael Jackson's mind, it might be, well, here you go. Here's a loan, and I want to spend as much time alone with your child as possible. And again, James's mom might not, or James's father might not realize that's where that was going, because they might just thought, oh, he's being very generous and etc. And he has all this extra money and and it was supposedly a loan. They were paying it. They were going to be paying it back. So, but it's very interesting though that what Howard Stern brings up, that this was during when he was with the child. So when James Safechuck's mom talks about the fact that, yeah, it was right around the right time that they got the loan for the house, and then Michael Jackson forgave the loan, it corroborates again. Because the check could have been written to them, and then the allegations come forward. Michael Jackson probably didn't know this at the time, but it was just a very convenient coincidence. Allegations come forward. Well, they have a loan. Well, you know what? No, you don't need to repay me, because now James Safechuck has come forward and he testified for Michael Jackson. So, again, very important piece of information. So let's go further.
I'm not saying it is, but apparently it was to buy their silence
Wow.
for their children.
So now,
And
but
why else would it be?
No.
But I'm saying this because these kids, they're infatuated. He shows them the world, and he puts them on big planes and flies them around and sends planes for them. And my point is,
More corroboration. He sends big planes, he flies them around, he has them pick them up. All the things that they were saying, all the things that the accused has been saying for years, okay? It's corroborated right here by his own sister. His own sister. And it's important to understand, at that point, Latoya really wasn't part. She was trying to get away from her family. And I think she was trying to get away because she felt that her family was too controlling. But let's go further.
yes, that's all good and wonderful, and the parents and mothers are loving it. However, what happens later on in life?
So you've been
When
living-
they're too old, and he tossed them to the side after 13 or whatever and said, you're too old for me.
so you've been
Another point, again, she corroborates it, that once they reach a certain age, he pushes them aside and he goes after another child. All these things have been stated. All these things have been stated way before these allegations. And according to this interview, we'll go further into it, it was even stated to Howard and Robin even before this interview, even before the 93 case. So it's a very, very important interview.
living.
Another one.
So you've been living with this secret for a long time, and it's been eating away at you, right? And now that it's come up in the news, you've been waiting and waiting and waiting. Finally, you said, I can't take this anymore?
Well, it's not that I knew for sure because I had never seen him in the act, so
Right.
I cannot say. And like I said, I don't want to be a silent collaborator. That's why I'm speaking out.
Right.
But something is going on, but you don't know exactly what. Because it's too strange, it's too weird, and...
So all you're saying is-
This is escalating.
So approximately how many of these checks do you think were written?
Well, I've only seen two. My mother showed me two.
Right.
When she showed me both of them the same day.
And
That goes to her credibility. She could have said, my mom showed me 10, 12. No one's going to know. Said 2. Very specific. 2 checks. That's important because 2 isn't as sensational as 10, 12, 15. You would think that Jack Gordon said, oh, that's not a big enough number. You got to say 7, 8, 9, 10. It was 2 checks. Again, it goes to the credibility of what she's saying.
Robin says, do you think this is escalating now?
It's like, he spends, it used to be a few days at a time. He spent 30 consecutive nights, supposedly, with this one 13-year-old boy.
Jordy. No, Jordy, I don't know at all. And it's
so, Toya, you're saying...
Of course, you guys have never seen him, but he's plastered all over the papers in Europe. Everybody knows what he looks like. He could never walk the streets in Europe.
But let me ask you this. See, here's the thing. You've never really seen him in bed with a kid, right?
No, I've never seen them in action, no.
So what you're really saying is you just know that money was given to the families of children, but you don't know, in fact, if he had sex with them.
But you are saying...
You're saying it was inappropriate.
No, you are saying... Wait a minute, that by 13, they were getting too old for him, and he would no longer want to be bothered.
Well, yeah, there were other kids.
What is it, Baba Booey?
Well, 2 things. First of all, lawyer Dominic Barber just called and he said the reason why the parents aren't stepping forward is because when you accept money for something like that, that's a felony.
Right.
And they'd be
You're right, and the parents are just as guilty, and they will go to prison as well. They're just as guilty of the crime.
Yeah, I think...
They're soliciting their children.
I'm going to pause it there, because this is a very, very important point. I made this last night. But what they're claiming is that in 1993, Joy Robson stated that Wade Robson went with them on the trip to Colorado. And I said, well, there's probably a very good reason for that. And what the reason is in 1993 they were defending Michael Jackson. So if you're defending Michael Jackson, I might not have said this, I actually might have tweeted this, but anyways, if you're defending Michael Jackson in 1993, and you know that he is up on child molestation charges, and then you come forward and you state, well, yeah, I let my child stay alone with Michael Jackson for a week, okay, unsupervised. Not only will that, if you're trying to protect Michael Jackson because you believe he's innocent, will it hurt him, it will also hurt Joy Robson, because then they're going to think that she's an unfit parent, and that essentially she is not, giving duty of care to her own child. And that is, a very important point. So when they bring up, well, I dug up something from 1993 and saw the statement that she stated XYZ, that could have happened. And if it did, there's a very valid reason for it. And they just brought it up. Very important point.
But how many people could he have paid off? I mean, my God.
You know what's weird too? Like we said, LaToya Jackson was coming on. I think LaToya should come forward with this information.
I agree 100%.
I've seen her and Jack together quite a few times. I don't think LaToya is the type that is being led around by Jack. I just don't. I don't think...
Another very important point. What Howard Stern is saying is he saw both LaToya and Jack Gordon basically around each other, etc., and he did not feel at that point in time, now Jack Gordon could have changed, but at that point in time that LaToya was essentially being bullied by her husband and subdued by her husband to essentially say anything. But when you listen to LaToya, this does not sound scripted. This sounds like, say even Jack Gordon, her ex-husband, who's now passed, was making her go in front of a microphone. I don't think it's something that he was scripting, if that was the case. I think literally she had these thoughts for years and years, and then finally had the opportunity to come forward and say, hey, look, this is what's going on. So, again, this interview has so much in it. It's why I have to take it piece by piece. Let's go further.
Putting us together,
Howard! Toya, I thought we were close.
Sorry.
I thought we were...
Who is this Larry you got on your mind?
Who is Larry that you have in your mind?
Okay, I'll tell you, there's a guy here that's working for us, and everything that he does, well, his name is Larry, and I call him every second, Larry, can you get this for me? Larry, can you get that? And I've been not that I want to just run you around or anything like that.
But you might be horny for Larry, I think. Because you have him so on your... I think that, you and Jack, of course, don't have sexual activity. And I'm getting a feeling that you want Larry. True?
I just wrote your name down in big letters so I can call you Howard.
But you want Larry, don't you? Is Larry handsome?
I don't pay attention to that.
Oh.
No, I don't.
Latoya,
So, honestly, he is, but I don't pay attention to it.
yeah, but you would like to be with him, wouldn't you?
No, but Howard, let me just get one thing straight. This is a very important issue, and we need to bring a stop to it. And that's why I spoke out, because I could not stand it. Did you see how old those men were and they were crying? And one who said, I never knew what my life was like. I was an alcoholic. I did things that were terrible because I didn't know what to do. That's how it harms you. You don't know what to do.
Don't you think, though? Don't you
You
think?
should have gone to a psychiatrist or something.
Right. You're absolutely right. I think stepping forward was the right thing to do. I
Well,
don't.
what do you think? And if he was...
Another very important point, what Howard Stern's bringing up, was when Latoya Jackson came forward with this, everyone basically scouted her and said she's nothing but a nut. She's nothing. She's not credible. She's Looney Tunes, and they basically mocked her and ridiculed her. And what Howard Stern's saying is that she's coming forward. She's a sister of Michael Jackson, coming forward with these allegations, and people should be listening to her. You're not doing these interviews where essentially you're there to mock her, but actually listen to what she's saying. This is why Howard Stern's such a good interviewer. Let's go further.
Gay. He should go with men his own age, but not pick on innocent little children. Leave them alone.
Pedophilia and being gay don't have anything to do with each other. Let's point that out.
Hey, you don't know about
Because, no, it's true. It's true. Pedophilia is
Robin, a lot of people
problem.
want to dislike me and say what I'm doing is wrong.
Now, I got to tell you
I
something.
have to say this to all those people, the Katie Kirks of the world and all these other people who would just say that's wrong for her to do this.
Who said it's
not
wrong?
because I'm helping other children, I'm saving other children's lives. And who in the world will let a 35-year-old man sleep with their kids not only a week, 30 days, or even longer or shorter, and fly them across the world and sleep in the same bed, and they walk in there and see them sleeping in the same.
So people are criticizing her, and what she's saying is common sense. Who would let a 35-year-old man sleep with a young child alone, and then sleep with another child alone? And then sleep with... What she's stating is basic common sense. Even back then, okay? Basic common sense. And everyone in the media around when this was going on was essentially discrediting Latoya and essentially basically making her look like she was out of her mind. Because you have to remember the magnitude of Michael Jackson at that point in time. Again, you're seeing this real time for that period. Okay, this is why this interview, I think, is such a important piece to this puzzle. It really is. Let's go further.
Let me tell you
Who in
something.
the world would do that?
After you made this statement, like yesterday we had those Wilson sisters in from
Yes.
Wilson Phillips.
Yes.
They were saying,
Yes.
we don't like what Latoya's been saying. We're very
And I thought
upset
the
about it.
Queen Latifah
Queen Latifah
was saying it on
was
the
saying,
Billboard Awards.
they had the Billboard Awards. Everyone, it was like an anti-Latoya award show. And I got to say something. What is that, Latoya? Hello?
She's talking to
Yes,
Jack.
I'm here.
Oh, tell Jack to leave you alone. Did you see the Billboard Awards? They were carrying on like it was an anti-Latoya award show. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
So the point
You know
is...
what? You should stress this on your show, Larry. Howard, this is very important.
Listen, I'm going to tell you about this. Would you pay Larry's parents $1 million for sex?
Absolutely not.
But where is this Larry? I want to meet him. He must be some good-looking Israeli guy.
Put Larry on.
Yeah,
No, but you know what you should do? What you should let these people know is that if it wasn't Michael and it was any other person on the street doing this, the first thing they would say is this guy should be under the jail cell. I'm not saying that he should
But
be.
of course, and
that's
you want to know
what they
something?
would say.
If it was anybody else, they would be applauding
You
you. They
told
said,
me Wilson Phillips, they don't know, they didn't live with him.
Yeah.
He never had little girls over.
well, let me tell
It
you
was
something.
always little boys.
You're absolutely right. If this was any other case, and it wasn't Michael Jackson, you would see that they would say, wow, the sister was really great. She came forward and she talked about
Yes,
it.
you'd be a hero.
You would be a hero.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And that's why you have to realize that's what these accusers were facing. That's what they were facing. You have somebody speaking sense saying, look, there's a 35-year-old man, I don't care what his name is, how famous he is, etc. He's taking young children alone into a bed. This is totally reprehensible. She was trying to say, she was trying to get people's attention, in a major way, and people weren't taking it seriously. And that's why when I talk about Taj Jackson, and I talk about, Brandy Jackson, and all these other people, and they are trying to go after Wade Robson, James Safechuck, they're doing literally what the people were doing to LaToya Jackson back in the day. They are trying to keep them quiet, discredit them, make them feel that they are nothing but, opportunists. All those things are happening. And it's happening right here in that time capsule. Let's go further.
But,
Latifah's, they didn't sleep there. They didn't know. They weren't at my house. They don't know Michael.
oh, she's a hard-on. Don't worry about Queen Latifah. But, it's really funny. Corey Feldman called us because he slept with Michael. He slept
Corey
with...
Feldman has been over to the house.
Yes.
What are they subjects there now? I know he slept in the room.
Yeah, he slept in the room, and Corey said, when LaToya's on, let me call in. I'm going to tell her she's a liar. Now, why is he reacting that
No, he
way?
slept in the room, like I just told you. I don't know if they slept together,
Right.
but I know that they probably did not sleep together because when Corey Feldman was at the house, Michael didn't like Corey Feldman. He says, I wish he would get out of here. He's too old. I don't want to be bothered with him.
Really?
Again, speaks to her credibility. What she's stating is, and I can believe this 100%, because Corey Feldman is an annoying adult. Could you imagine Corey Feldman as a teenager? Seriously. Michael Jackson, and he's now, close to 50, is his whole, he's dancing like him, dressing, he still can't give up that whole persona. Okay? And, and it's all these years. Could you picture him when he, right at the height of meeting Michael Jackson, could you picture him then, how clingy and how just obsessed he probably was with Michael Jackson? And Michael Jackson, again, I don't think Michael Jackson was attracted to Corey Feldman. I don't think it fit what he was looking for. And I also don't think that Corey Feldman was the correct age. And it just was, he was trying to be nice. And you're going to hear that further in the interview. But again, it speaks to her credibility. It's very detailed. Let's go further.
That's exactly what he said about Corey Feldman. He said, he's too old and I don't want to be bothered with him.
He's rejected. He was
And
rejected.
I kept saying, he's going to hear you. And Corey would tell him, but my father's an alcoholic and he's no good. My father's a drug. Just going on and on.
Really?
He wanted Michael to adopt him.
Well, where's
Yes, he
Corey?
did. And Michael says, I don't want to be bothered with this.
Yeah, Corey. Oh, wait. Corey, you want to talk to Corey, LaToya? Here, hold on.
I was right there.
Hold on, wait.
Corey on the phone.
Yeah, here he is. Hey, Corey.
Yeah.
Now, what LaToya is saying is that Michael didn't really like
Oh
you.
boy. I was listening to this whole conversation. I was trying to think, maybe this isn't a good idea. But now that I've heard LaToya lie about...
So why do you say she's
Why do
lying?
you say she's lying?
Why she
Well,
say?
she just lied about me personally.
Well, how do you know that
I
Michael
never lied
Jackson?
about you.
because-
The only thing I said was you
Because
probably
I can tell you, hold on. Because first of all, I can tell you that I never told Michael anything about my father, and the only reason she's saying that is because LaToya and Jack went to my father for management a couple
That's
years
not true
ago,
at all.
and this
That's
is
not
stuff
true.
that my father obviously told her. So, because I
That's
never
not true at
discussed
all.
my dad with Michael ever. So
LaToya-
it was all completely made up.
So
That's
you're
not
saying that
true
your
at all.
father never even had a drinking problem or anything?
No, my dad was never a drinker.
Right. And
Was it your mother then? It was somebody in your family because Michael came back and told me. He told me the same night you were there at the house. And I was afraid you were going to hear him because you were a young boy.
LaToya,
And I was afraid.
the only time that you
And I
were
said,
ever there
Michael,
when I
he's
was
gonna hear
there,
you. I don't even want to talk
you were
to
there
him.
one
Corey
time.
Okay, we're going to go to the next part. So it's broken up in different parts. Sorry for that interruption.
LaToya,
And I was afraid.
the only time that you
And I
were
said,
ever there
Michael,
when I
he's
was
gonna hear
there,
you. I don't even want to talk
you were there
to him.
one time.
He knows the truth.
now, Corey, now let me ask you something, Corey. You're angry with LaToya, but she says she saw checks, and she saw lots of young boys coming in and out of the house. Why would you
And
call
what
her a
else did I
liar?
say?
Well, there were young boys coming in and out of the house. There were young girls coming in and out of the house.
You
Not
don't
young
know.
anything. What does that have to do with anything?
Well, is it possible that something occurred and that the money was exchanged?
It's possible that money was
Corey,
Then why would you?
no, because he didn't like Corey.
I don't know
No,
what
Corey,
Michael...
absolutely not.
You know that Michael has been giving money to charity and to people that he cares about forever.
Yes.
There it is. The defense that is always used. Well, he always gives money to charity. And he's always giving money. So if he's always giving money, and then he gives, say, $600,000 to this child's family or whatever, then that can be used to mask the other things that are happening. And that's what I've always stated, that, you know, just because he gives money and he's charitable doesn't mean that there is not an undercurrent to why that's happening. And this is what LaToya is trying to put out there. But let's go further.
He has been giving money to charity. That's very true.
Okay, so
But you know what, Corey? He's not your brother. You did not live with him, and you don't know him. So who are you to make these statements?
Oh, I don't know him. Well, obviously I know
No,
him a
you
little
don't.
better
You
than
did
you
not
do.
live with him, and you don't know him.
How- I mean-
Because you stayed the night over, and Michael didn't want you there. I'll say it right in your face. Because he emphatically didn't want you over.
Oh, okay. That's why I still talked to Michael 6 months ago. When's the last time you talked
You
to
know
Michael?
what?
Toya?
You don't know Michael, though. Of course he'll smile in your face, and he smiled every time you came downstairs, too.
Yeah, but Corey, maybe.
So he invited me over because he didn't like me.
But Corey, let me ask you
Wait,
something.
no, wait. Don't
No,
come
Corey,
on
you
here.
pushed Toya over, remember? Every single time, because he would say, here he comes again. Oh, God.
But Corey, why did you?
No.
That I can believe 100%. I can believe that Corey Feldman wanted to go to Neverland. I can believe that Michael Jackson was frustrated. Was like, oh, here he comes again. Because I can see Corey Feldman being annoying. He's annoying just in general. But I could see him being annoying, period. And I could see Michael Jackson going, oh, Lord, here he comes again. That, to me, sounds very, very credible. And the fact that she's bringing it up to Corey Feldman is important too, because she is going, you know, toe to toe with Corey Feldman over this, where she could have said, yeah, you know, she could have backed off a little bit, and it would have helped her more. Whereas having this combative type of thing isn't, you know, really making her look wonderful. But she didn't. She said, no, he really didn't like you, and I can see that, because I believe that a lot of times with Michael Jackson, he would befriend certain children for different types of reasons. And maybe in Corey Feldman's case, it was maybe to get to another child. Or to get, you know, he was a child actor, maybe he knew other child actors, etc. But it's right there. It's an amazing, amazing point in this interview.
Oh, with Toya,
And I know that hurts you to hear it, but that's
No.
true. And you know what I said? I told Larry, I told him, I said, listen, I said, I'm sure he didn't sleep with Corey because of the way he felt about him.
You're talking about Howard now, not Larry.
Hey, Corey, why did your relationship with Michael taper off, though?
Howard,
Yes. Yeah, Corey, why did your relationship taper off with Michael, though?
It didn't taper off. As a matter of fact, I have a letter from him from 4 months ago,
Right.
when I had eye surgery, because I was in the hospital and he was leaving for tour, and he wrote me a letter which I have right in front of me and I could read to you.
What does it say?
Okay, I'll read you this letter. This letter from Michael, dated 6/22/93, says, Dear Corey, I'm with you, Corey, and sending you happy get well thoughts and all my love, Michael Jackson.
Now, that's a
this
form
is
letter.
obviously
I got the same letter.
I wouldn't call that a letter. I'd call that a note.
That's a note. But anyway, but Corey, isn't it, in a sense, you want to defend Michael because, I'm just asking, I'm putting this thought in your head, you want to defend him because you did spend time in the bedroom and you don't want anyone to think that anything went on, not that anything did go on.
I don't care.
nothing went on. Nothing went on.
Believe me.
Nothing went on with him and Corey.
Hold on.
He didn't like Corey.
If something did go on with me, I would be more than happy to announce it, because then I would be like everybody else and I'd jump on the bandwagon.
Right.
But that's not what it's about.
There
I
is
have
no
to-
bandwagon to jump on.
Which, that statement makes no sense. So he's saying, if something did happen to me, I would be more than willing, because I would just jump on the bandwagon. If something happened to you, you would be jumping on a bandwagon, and you'd be saying, hey, look, I was abused. So what he's saying is, what he's saying at that point in time in his life was that, well, you know, even if something happened to me, I would just join because, you know, I want to, go again, get money from Michael Jackson, even though he was abused. If that's the statement he's making there. So even if he was abused, is what he's saying. He was like, oh, I'll be jumping on the bandwagon. No, you wouldn't. You would just be talking about something abusive that happened to you. And, you know, again, that's the mindset. It's important to understand the mindset back in the day. So let's go further.
Now, why would Corey, why would Latoya? Let me ask you something, Corey. You seem to have some.
Howard, you know what?
Why would Latoya?
If you're going to speak to me, put Corey off the phone.
All right.
Corey is not making any.
Can I ask one last question,
Oh,
Corey?
no. Hold
Corey,
on.
why would Latoya lie? Why would Latoya lie?
Hold on. Let me say something to Latoya.
Let me ask you something, Corey. Why would Latoya lie about this?
Because
What do you
she's very sick.
Why is she sick though? How would you know that?
She seems to be managing her life. What's sick about her?
She's managing her life. She's the only person in that whole family that's never had a career. The only career she's had is based on her
But she
family.
has a career. She makes a lot of money.
That's not true at all, Corey. You know what? You have to stop and remember, I have 9 brothers and sisters, and you know what? You don't hear of any of them. They don't work, they can't get work, they can't do anything. Michael supports them, except for Jan. She's the only one, and myself. We support
Latoya,
ourselves, and no one else. So you cannot say,
Latoya, every time I ever saw you, okay, you and Michael were like best friends. You guys
That's
were
right,
so
Michael and I
close
were
together.
best friends, and that's why I know everything about him, and you don't.
No, so you guys were best friends, and now all of a sudden,
But you know what, Howard,
you decided that all...
I want to stop it there. Does this sound like somebody that's being pressured to say these things? Does this sound like somebody that has somebody, with a gun behind them saying, you better speak up? Because that's what they're saying. This is how they dismiss this. Oh, well, her husband was the one that was really pushing and being abusive for her to make these comments. No, this sounds like someone who's having a legitimate argument with somebody, trying to put their case forward. That's what it sounds like to me. It doesn't sound scripted. It doesn't sound like someone's making her say these things. It sounds like she's actually feeling these things in real time back then and expressing them to Corey Feldman and saying, look, I was his sister. You weren't. I know him better than you do. You don't really understand the full story. And she's trying to push that to him because she's trying to say, you don't really get this. And again, it just goes to the credibility of this whole situation. Let's go further. And the fact how insurmountable it was. Even the sister of Michael Jackson was not going to be believed. So let's go further.
Yeah, all right, Corey, I'm going to stay with
I'm not going to do that.
All right, I'll stay with Latoya. Corey,
He doesn't know what he's saying.
Corey,
I don't know what...
Corey, let me put you on hold. Yeah, let me say goodbye to Corey. All right, say goodbye to each other. Hold on. Wait a second. Latoya? Hello?
Yes.
All right, Corey's gone. Well, listen, that's
No, Corey's absolutely right. Michael did not like Corey. He thought he was too big and he was a pest. That's why I told you in the beginning, I don't think Michael ever slept with Corey at all. Never. Because that's how he felt about him.
And admittedly, you might have been confused about anything about Corey's parents because Corey says that he never told Michael Jackson any of that, and nor
But
is it
you know
true.
what? He did say that one parent
Well,
was
Michael might have-
alcoholic and one was a drug addict, and Corey knows this.
Well, Michael
That's what
Michael might have said that just to be outrageous. Do you understand what I'm saying?
That's true.
Yeah, you don't know if that is.
Well, he did corroborate what Latoya had said all along, that she and Michael were best friends when she lived at home.
That's right.
And he knows. He knew. He would see us whispering together, talking together, walking together. We did everything
Well,
together.
Latoya, let's just sum up by saying this. You never saw Michael Jackson have sex with any boys, but you are saying you saw checks that were paid to families, and you don't know if it was for sex or not, but you're just assuming it was because you thought it was.
I don't. My mother showed me, and she says, I said, Mother, so what? And she goes, well, what do you think this is for? I go, I don't know.
Right.
And she goes, don't be stupid, Latoya. And that's exactly what she said. And she stormed out the room. She was very angry.
All right. I hear you.
She's totally aware of everything. She's the one that kind of planted the seed in my head to think,
Do you think that
going on?
do you think you'll be called up as some kind of witness in any of this?
Well, they've been trying to subpoena me for a while now.
Right. Well, so you'll have to come and testify, right?
I really don't care to speak about that. I wouldn't really want to testify.
Right.
I really wouldn't.
Well, let me ask you something. What do you think Michael is going to do? There was word today that he's probably going to return to the country.
I'm gonna ask you guys something, and I don't care what all these entertainers say because he's Michael Jackson. If he was a regular person, they would not. They would say immediately, "This is wrong. Lock this person up."
Right.
They would say that right away, and it's very, very wrong. I'm speaking out because I know what it feels like. I've gone through, and I'm not going to stand by and be an accomplice and let it happen again.
Latoya, let me tell you
However,
something.
At the same time, why is he running? What is he running from? If you're innocent, why do you run?
That's right.
So back then, Michael Jackson was not returning back to the country. He was seen all over the places. There was talks of there was actually impersonators basically pretending to be Michael Jackson. That the paparazzi would get pictures to try to throw people off. he was not coming back to the country. And what LaToya is saying is, if he has nothing to fear, why doesn't he just stop what he's doing and come back to the country? Is what she's stating. And that's what was going on back in that time period. So, again, this is a time capsule. And I love the fact this interview is very just sort of, fly off the seat of your pants type of interview. And it shows a very just natural LaToya Jackson, not in an interview saying like it was, say, with Katie Couric, where, you have this very sort of, narrow type of window. And Howard Stern's doing what a good interview should do. He's asking follow-up questions, and he's allowing her to speak. That's the problem. And this is where all this happens. And this is what I was complaining about last night about that video I was critiquing. That you have to ask follow-up questions. You have to go deeper. You have to let the person say what they need to say. And a lot of times those interviews were happening with LaToya Jackson back when it happened. A lot of times there were sound bites, and they weren't really allowing her to go as far into this topic as she needed to. But Howard Stern's letting her speak and letting her say her piece. So let's go forward.
Right. Well, let me say something. Let me tell you something, LaToya. You absolutely have an obligation to say whatever you know, because if there is child abuse, you're doing the right thing. And I'm going to tell you something. If a brother of mine was a child abuser, if the second I had a thought that he was abusing children, I would confront him. I would confront him. I would say, "Are you abusing children?" He'd probably say, "No." I'd say, "I suspect that you are, and I have to report you." Because I'm going to tell you something. That's the worst offense in the world. So if you have a feeling that something was going on that was wrong, or you were a witness to something that was that wrong, even though it's your brother and it kills you to do it, I think I can't certainly disagree with your decision to come forward.
Howard Stern was one of the few people during that whole time period that made that statement. I want people to understand that. Howard Stern, the shock jock, okay, was one of the few people of anybody in that time period that says, we need to listen to what LaToya Jackson is saying. And maybe if they actually gave her a serious platform where they didn't try to discredit her, didn't try to make her look loony, didn't try to, make her look off kilter. They did a really deep, hard interview. They might have gotten a whole lot of answers, and maybe they could have stopped Michael Jackson before he abused the next child, and the next child, and the next child. So, again, this is why, this interview to me is so important, because you have to realize it was one person, which is Howard Stern, saying, hey, look, this makes sense to me. And a whole group of mainstream media and all the rest that didn't want to see Michael Jackson get torn down because they understand that there was such a huge fan base, and they knew that there would be repercussions for doing that. But Howard Stern could care less. Howard Stern was one of those people. He was, at that point, especially in his career, he was not a Hollywood type. He was really basically going against Hollywood. And he was allowing LaToya Jackson to speak because he said, hey, look, there's something here. I'm not just going to, make this a fluff interview. But very good. Let's go further in.
I really respect what you're saying. You're a very bright man, and you must understand this was a hard decision for me to make.
Of course it is.
It was tearing me to pieces inside, and then for the public to do this to me, to denounce me for saying something that's
well, I'm not denouncing you. I'm not denouncing you.
You're not.
That's
you're
right.
Not at all. But that's what makes you so smart, simply because you understand and you know how painful and how
I say let's get to the truth.
Stop.
Let's get to the truth.
Of it.
Well, for people who think that this is a Johnny-come-lately story that you've just made up, this is not true. She has been grappling with this for a long time.
Yep.
Because she had mentioned it to me before.
Yep, she had mentioned it.
That's the important part of this interview, where they say, well, she was a Johnny-come-lately to this story. And they said, no, she's been grappling with this for a long time. And Robin Quiver says, she has mentioned this to me before. okay, before the 1993 allegations, and Howard Stern even reiterates that, saying, yeah, she has mentioned this to me as well. So why that's important is it shows that there were thoughts in LaToya's head even before the Tel Aviv, because I believe this interview was done the day after the Tel Aviv interview, the Tel Aviv press conference. So again, it puts everything into perspective. It puts a timeline there. So if she's saying this to Robin Quivers years before, and saying this to Howard Stern years before, or a long time before, then it shows that in her state of mind, these were her thoughts. She was relaying it to Robin and to Howard even before that, maybe in private conversations. Very important interview. Let's go further.
To us, and
Let me tell you something, Howard and Robin. I heard something like Corey said Michael's nice and he gives to charity and all these things. Yes, he gives to charity and he's nice and he does all these things. But let me tell you something. Whenever there's a serial killer, what do you hear all the neighbors saying and everybody who knows
He
him?
was so nice.
Oh, he was the nicest guy in the world. He was so sweet, so kind. He would never do a thing like that. We're so shocked.
let me tell you something, Latoya. If you were here in the studio right now talking to me, I would be cuddling you and comforting you, as a matter of fact, and holding you while you said these things to make you feel better.
Thank you, because you know why? It hurts so badly, and I feel like I have to fight and scream to get my point across. And I shouldn't have to. This is not my predicament. Michael put himself in this predicament. I shouldn't have to do this. I should have just been able to make a statement.
You felt obligated to come forward, and I applaud you for that.
And no, I'm not doing it for money. I haven't received a penny for it, and I'm sick of my mother saying that, and the rest of the world is writing off what she's saying. If she's the one, she's afraid the money is going to stop. That's her problem.
Well, Latoya, I want to thank you for calling in. When are you coming back? When are you coming back from Israel?
And for all those people who believe that he did not do it, I'm just so sorry, because you know why? When it's your children and it's your child, you better think twice.
All right, thank you.
Again, coherent, making valid points, talking about if this was your child. This is what, everyone wants to think that LaToya Jackson was off the wall. She was making no sense. She was like this, bumbling idiot, someone that should be put in a straitjacket. I don't hear that in this interview. I hear somebody that's actually making sense. Saying, look, I know it's my brother. I know he's famous, but I can't let that get in the way. What he's doing is wrong. And she's not even taking it to the step where she's saying, oh, I saw something, which would be really outrageous if that's the way you're going to look at it. She's stating that she saw checks and she knew that her brother was spending a good amount of time with children alone. And what she was saying was basically boys. Okay? That is not outrageous. And then she's stating that why are people attacking her when all she's trying to do is bring it forward, and it's hurting her. It's hurting her relationship with her family, and it's not helping her in any way. She's being attacked left, right, and center. And according to her, she's not making any money for it. She's giving interviews to these outlets, and she isn't making money for it. But even according to Howard, she doesn't really need the money. So again, this is a very important interview because it puts everything into context. Instead of just speculation and because you had a couple of those interviews, but it didn't really go deep enough. This interview goes really, really into all the issues. This is why I said it before. Howard Stern is a very good interviewer. He knows what questions to ask and how to get the correct information out. So let's go further.
Thanks, Latoya.
All right, goodbye.
What's the matter? You all right?
No, I'm fine. It's just that when you tell me about these award shows and it was...
It's upsetting. Well, it is.
Yeah, this is not an easy position to take.
No, it's not easy to do
This
it.
wasn't the easy thing to do.
I don't know why more people aren't interested in coming out to find out the truth. Of course we
They
should
don't
find
care
out.
about innocent children. They don't care about these kids that are being harmed and hurt and scarred for life. They only care about the fact that he's a star and we're not going to let this legend die.
So then you've done the right thing. Latoya, you've done the right thing.
I'm helping children.
You did the right
I will
thing.
always stand by and help them.
Then don't even give it a second thought.
That's another very important point. What she's trying to do is, in her mind, is saying she knows she's going against her brother. She knows it's affecting the family. Her family probably is, hating her at this point because she's actually talking about something they don't want to be talked about. But she's reinforcing the fact that I have to do this because I'm doing the right thing, and looking for validation from even like Howard Stern to say, you're doing the right thing. It's okay because everyone's telling her to shut up. That, again, it goes to the credibility. It goes to her mind, her state of mind at the time. And again, there's so much in this interview. There really is.
You did the right thing, and you have to do what you think is right, okay?
Thanks for giving me that support. I appreciate that, and I need
You're welcome. Thank you, Latoya. Bye-bye.
Take care.
See you when you're back in New York.
Right, we'll see you later. Say goodbye to Jack.
I sure will.
Okay, bye-bye. That's Latoya Jackson. Heated argument between her and Corey Feldman. I felt it was fair to, of course, let Corey in on this. Where is Corey? Put him back on the phone.
Put him back on to,
Yes.
Get his point of view, I suppose. He didn't get really to say much.
I was going to ask Latoya for a nude photo, but,
I think that would have been inappropriate.
Inappropriate, Robin? All right, I'll take a break. I'll get Corey back on the phone, but, no, I really, sincere when I say it. I don't think Latoya should, sit quiet if she feels she knows something. Why should she? Why
I would be more suspicious of a guy if his sister did come out than to just start attacking the sister. I would say, let's take a closer look at this if his sister is saying these things. But everybody else just jumps on the bandwagon and says Latoya's a nut.
Yeah. We'll have Corey back. Corey called as soon as he got disconnected, and he said, I got to get on after she's off. Yeah, well, Corey is welcome anytime. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Latoya's right, though. I mean, if it wasn't Michael, people, of course,
Everybody would say, what is that guy doing with all those children?
They are tiptoeing around. This is Hollywood. They're all fakes and phonies. Don't you see it? They all scream they're worried about children and children's causes and all kinds of things. And now that an investigation is going on...
the big child advocate, she has nothing to say about this.
Nothing. You can't get a comment out of her.
Again, very important point, and I don't want to bash Oprah because she has come forward, but back then she didn't. And like they said, very important child advocate, but they weren't willing to go against Michael Jackson because of the magnitude of his fame. And they knew that there was going to be a huge backlash. Now, if you have people as powerful as Oprah, even back then she was a very powerful person, not willing to come forward, and you have other stars and celebrities not willing to really say anything at all, how do you think a victim feels of Michael Jackson? How do you think they feel if they're going to come forward? What's going to happen to them? And when people say, well, why did Evan Chandler settle? There's your answer. It's right there. Do you think that somebody wants to deal with that and face that? And deal with that? I mean, Evan Chandler threw an olive branch out and said, look, I'll let my son testify in a criminal hearing, but I want police protection. Because he knew how powerful Michael Jackson's stardom was at that point, and the amount of vitriol and the amount of hate and death threats and everything that goes along with it. And the LAPD made a bad decision, or the FBI, whoever made that decision, not to give him witness protection. Because if they did, then things might have been completely different. But you understand why, though. You can see this is why it was so difficult for people to come forward. And when you have a Jordan Chandler or a Jason Francier or a Gavin Arvizo, etc., it's such a big deal because you're dealing with somebody that has star power of that magnitude. So let's go further.
She should at least say, hey, listen, he should be investigated, and if he's guilty, he's guilty. And if he's not,
forward and prove his innocence.
If Latoya knows something, she should certainly open her mouth. You should applaud that. It's very convincing. They always get mad in the newspaper when they say, how come the family never said, how come no one stepped forward? How come, so someone stepped forward? She says, listen, this is what I know. I want to say
Look what happens to people who step forward.
I'm not going to say that I didn't see these checks. And she's not even saying she saw molestation. She's saying she saw checks.
I mean, if she was going to lie, why not lie and say I saw him in bed with somebody?
Right. There's nothing wrong with it. I just wish she hadn't called you Larry. Did that ruin it? Oh, man. I can't believe she could call me Larry. Right out of the gate. Do you think it was Larry King she was thinking of?
No.
That was a pretty good cover story if she made that up. I don't think she made that up about having a guy there named Larry.
Well, there's no secret out that Jack and Latoya do not experience sexual relations.
So she could be a little...
She could be frustrated and liking this guy Larry a
She
lot.
could be a little frustrated. And Larry the Jew, who lives in Israel, could be walking around in a Bippy shirt.
Latoya doesn't experience it. I gotta feel with Jackson like another room.
Yeah.
Staring at her.
I like when Jack picks up the phone and Latoya yells at him to hang up.
Hang up the phone, Jack. Hang up. Hang up the phone.
Again, another very important point. Exactly what they brought up. Again, this is a very natural interview. The fact that Jack Gordon picks up the phone and kind of makes a fool of himself because there's another call or whatever coming in, and Latoya doesn't sound like she's intimidated. She basically says, "Hang up the phone." You know, this doesn't sound like somebody who is being literally browbeated to the point of no return to make these statements. And this is going to realize this is a live interview situation. And it's unscripted. Howard Stern doesn't script stuff. So again, it goes to the credibility of what she was saying back in the day. Even though now she's retracted, and there's many reasons I believe why she did, this speaks for itself. Let's go further.
Hang up. Hang up, Jay. Jack. Larry. Howard. I'm taking your name down, Larry, so I don't call you the wrong name. I wrote your name down, Larry. Everything's fine.
And then 2 seconds later, she calls you Larry.
No problem. Who cares? Listening to her and Corey yell at each other is worth it.
Now that everything's cleared up.
Well, now that would you have to be the judge on this case?
You don't know him like I do.
I do know him like you.
Oh, I don't know him. Your father was an alcoholic.
My father never had a drink.
Oh, your mother was an alcoholic.
My mother never had a
I
drink.
didn't like you anyway. Oh, screw you, Michael hates you. Tell the truth, Your Majesty. Your own. Larry. Howard. Jack. Jay.
It's wild. It's wild stuff. We'll take a break. We'll be back right after these words. You're listening to Main Street. Howard Stern. We're back with a man who was sexually abused as a child by himself. Yeah, baby, that's true. All right, Corey Feldman joining us again. Corey, just in case you just tuning in, Corey Feldman, of course, the great child actor, now an adult actor. He got into a little fight there with Latoya Jackson. I was thoroughly entertained. I like when Latoya said, "I'm not talking to Corey."
Yeah, you know why?
That was good.
You know why? Because nobody confronted her.
Okay, this is the last part.
You know why? Because nobody confronted her ever in person.
Yeah, but I'm going to tell you something. I gotta sort of say something to you here.
Okay.
You're a funny guy.
Thank you.
She is the guy's sister.
Right.
You admit she was his best friend.
And all she is saying, she has come forward and said that all she saw was checks.
Okay, no, wait. So, now, if that was all she said...
That's what I thought she said.
Okay, if... conference yesterday, he has molested small children for years. That was her quote. He has molested small children for years.
And how do you know that's not true?
She couldn't say it was true. But she couldn't sit there and say she saw it.
But you're calling up and saying that based on your one experience. Plus, Corey, you're not the best witness.
Okay.
Because I got to tell you
But
something.
how many people actually see molesters in the act?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And it is true that when Corey was young, he was Michael Jackson's friend, and he sleep in the same bed. Did you sleep in the same bed?
No, I slept in his bed that he did not sleep in.
Right.
Well, let me also say
But then again, Michael Jackson wasn't attracted to Corey.
That
According to
Latoya said that.
Yeah, according to Latoya. Okay, and I
Wait
got
a minute,
something else.
Corey.
And Corey got upset because Michael doesn't like him.
But wait a minute,
Right.
Corey, she did corroborate something that you also told us, that you were the aggressor in your relationship with Michael Jackson.
But no, that's not true at all.
You told
You told us that.
No,
you
Michael
pursued
called
him.
me. Michael invited me to his house. Okay?
Yeah.
What do you think let me tell you something about Michael Jackson, okay? Michael Jackson has got like 300 people that work for him,
Yeah.
including a full security team. And if Michael Jackson does not want somebody near him, he can very well avoid them from being near him.
It's amazing that argument that he brought up back then gets used even today. Full staff, huge amount of security team, etc. How could anything happen? It's amazing, but let's go further.
Not hard at all.
Well, hey, by the way, with Corey, you never know what you're getting either.
Right.
Corey, you had a really screwy screwed up life.
Yes.
Corey was...
And maybe you may not remember things. There were times.
Oh, please, Robin.
Corey, isn't it possible that you might have had sex with Michael
Get out
Jackson?
of here.
You know what I mean? Because, like, there were times you were so wasted, guys did get it on with you.
Well, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah, you know, maybe if we hypnotize you, you could find a few things that might have happened.
Yeah.
Plus, Corey,
I thought it was a video, but...
Look, Corey, you're very ensconced in the whole show business thing. You know what I mean?
No. Let me tell you something. Okay, first of all...
That doesn't mean that he didn't molest children, but you're just going on record and saying, hey, I slept in the guy's room and he didn't molest me.
Okay, I went on record saying that, but what I'm saying about LaToya is different.
Right,
okay?
you're saying that she has no concrete evidence either.
No, what I'm saying is that she's pissed me off, okay?
Right.
She's pissed me off because all of a sudden now she's a savior, okay? If this was all true, why didn't she say something 5 years ago?
Because she didn't have the balls to say it.
She had the balls,
Wait a second, Corey. Wait a
3
second.
years ago
You're
to
telling
come
me-
out and say that her father abused her and sexually molested her, and she could come clean with all this other stuff and write her book and this whole bit. But now all of a sudden she's gonna just remember this too.
I don't know. She's saying, hey, there's an investigation. I'm feeling guilty that I never stepped. There's lots of people who witness crimes and stuff.
And don't say anything.
And never say a word for
But her whole
years.
script before was that she was wiping the slate clean and she was bringing out everything that was,
Corey, how long did it take you?
Before you came out on our show and spoke about...
Hey, when I was ready to be honest, I got honest about everything, and that was it. No, that's true. I mean, once
maybe
I
that's the way
decided I
you
wanted
did
to
it.
be
That's
honest
the way
about
Corey
it.
did it.
Huh?
So, Corey, that was very good when the two of you were going at it. I really enjoyed that. And by the way, LaToya did say stuff about your parents that is not true.
That's
Is
right.
your mother an alcoholic?
Well, my mother has had her problems.
Right. And your father is not an alcoholic?
No, my father smoked marijuana.
Right.
Well, she had it absolutely right.
No, she didn't.
No, she didn't. She said they had a problem with it.
No,
Yeah, she said I was going. She said I was running around telling Michael that he was an alcoholic and this and that. That's just BS.
Right.
She said later, Corey, that, well, I know one parent had a drinking problem, another parent had a drug problem.
No, wrong.
See,
I mean,
it's wrong.
It
You
is.
know,
That's what Corey's saying. It's wrong.
He just said
Just
his
'cause
mother
somebody
had a
sm-
drinking problem and his father smoked marijuana.
Yeah, but smoking marijuana isn't exactly a drug problem.
To LaToya, that may be drugs.
yeah, okay, yeah, but LaToya is perfect and innocent. She doesn't have sex with her husband, but she poses for Playboy. It makes sense to me.
Well, I mean, evidently.
Again, look how again, this is Corey Feldman back then. But look how he tried to discredit LaToya, okay? Well, she's this, she's that, she's this, she's that. Not going to the heart of the problem, of the big part of the problem here, which is what Howard Stern's bringing up, which is Michael Jackson was taking young children into his bed. That's absurd. And again, discrediting anyone that came forward, even Michael Jackson's own sister.
Evidently, there's
A
a lot
lot
of
of stuff
confusion.
here doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean,
The only thing that makes sense is I think we had a very high tune-in rate for that argument.
well, let me tell you something, man. The only reason I had to come on and talk to her was I was so frustrated.
Right. No, but you did the right thing. You came forward, you talked, you said your piece, and LaToya said her thing.
But let me ask you something.
What?
What do you think she has to gain by doing this?
I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. You know, I just know that there's something weird with her and that husband of hers.
There's no doubt that. She even says that.
Let me tell you something. I spent last weekend with the Jacksons.
Yeah.
Okay? I was at their house for the whole weekend with Kate and Joseph.
No wonder he's busy defending them. Look at the
absolutely.
energy he's getting out of this.
Yeah, well, I spent the weekend with Kate and Joseph. Kate's sitting there practically crying.
Well, any mother would.
Huh?
Any mother would.
Yeah,
Well, of course. And she's sitting there looking me in the eyes going, Corey, Michael would call me up after being with children all day in the hospital, and he would say, God, they're in so much pain. I wish there was something I could do to help them. You know, with tears, crying on the phone to me. And how can they say this stuff is true? And how can my own daughter be out there saying all these horrible things about her brother and her family? You know, and when I look into a mother's eyes and see that, how am I supposed to?
When did you go to the ranch? When did you go to the LaToya? When did you go to the Jackson home?
Last weekend.
So how could the mother be crying about LaToya saying that? She didn't hold the press conference till yesterday.
She was saying about the other stuff that LaToya had said, not even getting into all of this.
Almost caught you.
So what he's saying is that LaToya hadn't even come forward yet. You said it was a week ago, and Latoya hadn't come forward to the press conference. So, did she know that Latoya was stating other things beforehand? I don't know what that statement even means, but I just thought it was kind of funny that he actually caught him in that moment. But let's go further.
Tricky little. No. All right. Hey, Corey, I gotta go anyway. You know what? Who the hell cares?
He slipped through again.
I'm too busy. He always has an answer, that Corey.
No, because I'm being honest.
Hey, I'm gonna be out there signing books on Los Angeles on.
Yeah, I want to see you. You always say that when you come out
Why don't
here,
you
you
come
want to
over?
get together.
Why don't you come over to the book signing?
Where's it at?
It's gonna be at Book Soup.
On Sunset?
Sunset. I'll get there at 11 o'clock, and I'll sign anybody's book who gets there by noon. How's that?
Well,
Bring the Jacksons.
I want to come early so I can see you.
Oh.
Because otherwise it'll be a mob scene.
It will not. It's gonna be fine.
Oh, please.
No. It's at Christmas time. No one's around.
It's Christmas.
Yeah, a lot of people are out of the country.
I'm going to pause it here and go forward because basically in this part of the interview they're just talking about meeting up for the book signing. And I think in the very end is when the last part kind of comes in. Let me see if this is it.
Oh, it's their Joe. We even have George Takei Jr. Like they had to show the future somehow. Ever seen Michael Jackson's penis?
No.
Is he half white and half black?
Tell the truth.
Half white and half black.
You've seen him with the shirt off?
No, he's got black. Yeah, he's got brown spots.
He has brown spots?
Yeah.
Really?
Like a zebra?
No, like spots. Like
a leopard?
Leopard.
Leopard? All right, listen, Corey, I gotta go. I'll see you. You wanna get together in California?
Yeah.
So come by. I'm telling you, there's gonna be all kind of bikini girls in the window. It's book soup. Enough of this. At this point, I've had it
Wide open.
I don't think so.
But although Corey hasn't gotten maybe physically a check, but he does get to go.
Okay, and
Corey?
Because she was abused, Corey Jackson, I believe.
correct.
Well,
I can get closer. Let me ask you a question.
I would like to have Pearl Jam play, but
Oh, yeah.
Is there going to be
So there's
security
going to be a
there?
caller
either
coming
them or Guns N'
Let's
Roses.
put this on pause for a second. There's going to be a caller coming up that kind of basically goes after Corey Feldman or questions Corey about his stance on Michael Jackson. Confronts Corey about that stance. So it's coming up any second.
I mean, will there be security so if I show up, they can like walk?
Yeah. Just wait online. Don't sign your book. Why do you have to cut in front of the line?
Well,
You think you're a big shot?
no, just because
What is
thought
this,
maybe I
John?
could get
I have
closer
a woman
to you
on the phone
faster,
upset
Howard.
with Corey. You have a woman on the phone upset with Corey?
Yeah, upset with what Corey's saying.
Why is she upset?
Well, because she is, she doesn't know why Corey doesn't have sympathy for these people who are molested, or allegedly molested.
Ma'am?
Yeah.
I think that Corey is basically saying that his experience was one not of being molested, and he said that basically he felt Latoya didn't have any evidence.
Correct.
Well, the pain that I'm feeling is, I saw Latoya on TV, I saw the pain that she's going through in her heart. Here she is, not only is she a victim of child abuse, but now her brother, who's her best friend, she's telling the world, not only was he my best friend, but I had to keep this horrible secret because I really believe what my brother did was wrong. And I'm not going to stand.
Yeah.
What she's doing is coming out saving the children of the world. And Michael Jackson, I believe, is being really hypocritical. Save the children for what? Himself?
Yeah,
For
well,
his bank account?
I'll tell you something. This woman has a point, Corey. I believe that what Latoya did as well was very brave. I don't see any. It's very hard.
He doesn't even know why she would do it. He can't come up with a good reason. Exactly.
That's right.
Well, the only reason I can come up with is the fact that she's very sick and she's doing it for attention.
What? Because she was abused, Corey. What are you hiding from Michael? How much of a check did you get?
Ooh.
Oh, really?
Ooh. Wait a minute. You had that.
I hadn't thought of that. This lady.
Let me tell you something, whatever your name is. I was molested as a child, okay? And
Corey's had everything.
When did you
believe me, I would prefer to check, okay?
He was high and some guy.
Yeah, right.
No, seriously. Corey was high and some guy did some stuff to him.
Yeah, the guy who befriended him.
Yeah.
Oh, that is nauseating.
But although Corey hasn't gotten maybe physically a check, but he does get to go to the Jacksons' home. He does get to go to the compound.
Right, so it's in his best interest to keep his mouth shut.
Now, wait a minute, Howard. Howard, what happened?
Latoya went and got her own life.
Now you're turning on me.
No, Yeah, he's
I'll
just
turn on
telling
you
the
as
truth.
I'll turn on you as long as
Open
I
your eyes, man.
Yeah, what was that, Howard?
I'm listening to the lady.
I'm
Oh,
telling
I
Corey to open his eyes.
Oh, my eyes are wide open.
I don't think so, Corey.
I think
you're in
so.
as much all right, Corey. Jackson family. Corey, I have a question for you. What do you think of this little 13-year-old boy?
I think that it's horrible what he's being put through.
Do you think he's lying?
I don't think he hasn't said anything.
Oh.
Have you heard from him?
Well, he has given a deposition, Corey.
Well, he gave a deposition, but we haven't heard from him. We haven't seen him on the witness stand.
All right, listen, I had enough of this. I just
I'm gonna stop it there. So, again, what's important with this interview is it shows a very unscripted live interview where there's a lot of back and forth. There's some humor. There's some bantering. There's a whole bunch of things going on there, and you don't hear Jack Gordon once in that interview. Well, maybe once when he talks about the Rolls Royces and stuff like that. But for the most part, you don't really hear him in that interview at all. Okay? And you hear LaToya Jackson arguing with Corey Feldman. You hear her bringing up things that, again, corroborate all the things that were mentioned in these allegations. She brings up Jimmy Safechuck's name. She brings up the fact they were sleeping alone. She brings up the fact that there was checks written, and one of them was for the Safechucks. She brings up the fact that Michael Jackson would have one boy and then drop that child and go after another one and drop that one. And she also brings about the fact this has happened for years. They also bring up the fact that both Robin and Howard bring up the fact that she had been grappling with this for years and hadn't come forward. Even Corey Feldman criticizes her for that, saying, well, if she knew this way back when, why didn't she come forward, etc. So you have somebody where, again, this is pointing to credibility, because this wasn't something that just, Michael Jackson gets accused, now she's just going to jump on the bandwagon. No, she was grappling with this, and she is at that point saying, okay, I can't, say nothing anymore. It points to the credibility of LaToya Jackson in that time period. Now, she has come forward afterwards and said, well, her husband was abusive, that she didn't mean any of those things, etc. But listening to this interview, I don't get that at all. I think that what happened was the marriage between her and Jack Gordon obviously dissolved. Maybe Jack Gordon at that point was being extremely abusive. She needed to get out of that situation, and she wanted to go back to her family because, let's face it, even though she might have had a rift there, it's still her family. And the only way to get back in was to, essentially go back into the family fold, drink the Kool-Aid, say nothing happened, etc. But this interview points directly to the opposite. And it's incredibly corroborating. I think this is, even though it's an old interview back from 1993, it is really a bombshell, because it shows a very unscripted interview. A very just live Howard Stern, type of interview, where she is even arguing the fact with Corey Feldman and making valid points. I mean, this interview, I think, is extremely important for people to hear, because all the things that are being said now and what happened in the Me Too movement, people aren't going to believe you. People are going to harass you. People are going to come after you. They're going to say that you're lying. They're going to say that you're after money. But Toya brings all that up in this interview, and so does Howard Stern. It's an incredible interview. I'm going to go to see if there's anything going on in the chat, because, again, I was really wanted to focus on this interview. I think this is a major find. I thank that person who sent me this particular interview. Like I said, I've been looking for this for years. I finally, to be able to hear this again, because I knew I was like, my memory, this was such an important interview. I just didn't realize how in-depth it actually was. So let me go over here real quick. Okay, so yeah, there are people in the interview, people in the chat, I'm sorry, in the interview. Go up here and just scroll up. Okay, so not a whole lot of conversation, but hey, get some, I guess. And talking rubbish. Delusional guy searching for trash. No, you heard it. You heard it. There's nothing delusional about this, Mr. DS, because it's not my words. Those are LaToya Jackson's words. You heard it from her own mouth. You know, and you can sit there and talk about delusion. It's right in front of you. You're deluding yourself if you don't think that she didn't sound credible in that interview. You're deluding yourself. Yeah, I really do. Yeah, and she did say that her husband made her say it, but I think, yes, her husband might have said, you need to stand in front of a microphone and you need to spill your guts. He could have said that. I could see Jack Gordon saying that, but in this interview, she did not seem intimidated whatsoever. It seemed like she was just going forward and telling what she knew. She wasn't backing down. It's a very, very telling interview. It really is. And it's corroborating all the things that are being brought up. The fact that there were boys sleeping alone with Michael Jackson, even at the Havenhurst estate. The fact that there was checks written, and one of them was to the Safechuck family. The fact that LaToya felt this even before the allegations came forward. And the fact that there was, big gifts being given away. And even Jack Gordon talks about Rolls Royces and being given away. The fact that LaToya Jackson talks about how if this was any other person, there would not be a backlash. And you can see the backlash immediately. And it points to the credibility of these people coming forward because you know that they're going to be harassed and intimidated. If celebrities aren't even going to take it serious, and even Oprah back in the day isn't going to say something because they feel intimidated, how does a child feel? How does their family feel who maybe really aren't even used to any of this? Again, it points directly straight to the credibility of these claims. Again, he possibly could have. I think Michael Jackson probably didn't abuse famous actors because maybe it was too high profile. But it does, and again, what people realize, it also could be he was infatuated with them but never took it to the next level because he knew that it was going to be disastrous. And, that could definitely be a possibility. But, who knows? As for LaToya revealing this, what happened was, this is right after the day after the Tel Aviv interview. So she gave an interview, basically not even an interview, a press conference at Tel Aviv in Israel. And she talked about the allegations and said that she could no longer be a silent collaborator and she needed to come forward because she could no longer sit there and while Michael Jackson was her brother and was basically abusing children. And she felt a need to come forward. And Howard breaks it down really easy, that she didn't need the money. She didn't really, at that point she was making a life for her own and she was doing perfectly well for herself. I mean, she was in Europe, traveling all over the place. She didn't need that type of attention. And if anything, it was going to hurt the Jackson brand, and she's a Jackson. So, again, you have to take this in context. I think she made that perfectly. I don't think Corey was Michael Jackson's type. I don't think that's what he was looking for. It looks like he was looking for these children that, when they grew up, they would be models. I mean, they were looking for these specific these children had to almost be like picture perfect, I think, in his head. And so yeah, Corey Feldman did not really fit that that type of child. Well, he could have. I just don't think he liked Corey Feldman. Someone said about maybe he confided about his CSA, throwing Miss Rose. I don't know. I don't think so. I just think that he wasn't. I think Latoya hit it. And she was just annoying Michael Jackson to no end. And I can see that. I can see him doing that as a teenager. Well, I don't know how rational people believe nothing. I think most rational people do believe that something happened. But you have a very, very large vocal, I should say that, cross that out. You have a very small minority of people that seem larger than they are. And they're very organized and very vocal. So what happens is they flood all the conversations that, like this channel doesn't have enough people on it for them to really do much of anything. The page does, and that's why they're always on the page. But they're not really going to bother with us pretty much. But any mainstream article, or even any article, they're always in the comment section, flooding the comment section. And they make it seem louder, they make it seem bigger and louder than not. But Taj Jackson still, hasn't even reached, he's basically at 1/7 of his goal. I mean, and supposedly all these millions of people, these adoring, legions of fans, he would have had that 777,000 without any problem. But again, it didn't happen. Believe it, they want to believe. The big falling out between Michael and Corey happened in 2001. I guess that's when the Michael Jackson was in New York City, and what happened was that the Trade Center went down, and they had to get out of there quick, and he wouldn't allow Corey Feldman to go on the bus, or I think eventually he did, but I think there was a struggle for Corey Feldman. They didn't want to let him go on or whatever, and they ended up having a falling out about that. And that's what happened when 2003 allegations came out. In 2005, he ended up basically testifying for the prosecution. So there was a falling out, and then eventually. I'm sure Corey just got over it. But, again, this is a very important interview. And I'm going to really try to get people to notice this, and the right people, because it really does have a lot of information in this small, 40-minute, roughly, interview. And the most important part was roughly with, 20, 25 minutes. So I really think that it corroborates a lot of what's being said. And, it shows that because I believe Latoya in these interviews, I think she's being very, very forthcoming, that Michael Jackson's own mother has suspicion, and that, basically, didn't do really much about it. So, that's the stream for tonight. I'll see. This will be obviously archived on this particular YouTube channel, and then hopefully we can get it shared. Thank you very much, and you have a good night.